It's Thursday, June 11th, and this is Now on HNN.
I think the question is, did we reopen too soon?
The Dow sinks as virus cases rise, deflating the country's optimism.
This as Governor Ige extends the mandatory quarantine for trans-Pacific travelers.
Testing before getting on a plane is one of the key components that we are looking at.
President Trump heads to Dallas for a conversation about race relations. I'm Skyler Henry at the White House, where there are mixed messages about police reform.
Between ensuring police can do their job and ensuring that there is needed reform.
Cities around the world are evaluating their controversial monuments. I'm Ian Lee with a look at the latest statues to topple.
That's unheard of.
And here's a first. Dozens of Honu are nesting at Bellows Beach. These stories coming up on This Is Now.
Good afternoon, the time is now 12:01. You're watching This Is Now. I'm Jonathan, your director producer. Alongside Ashley here, we got some breaking news from the Department of Health we want to get to right off the top.
Right, the State Health Department is reporting 7 new COVID-19 cases today. We're told all on Oahu, bringing the statewide total to 600 and we don't have the statewide total. So far, more than 90% of patients have been released from isolation, and Hawaii's death toll stands at 17.
All right, real quickly too, we want to talk about Wall Street. A lot of people are talking about this. Took quite the dip this afternoon, or today the Dow Jones dropped more than 1,800 points. That's 6.9%. We'll keep monitoring it throughout the week. Howard, have the latest as the markets reopen tomorrow morning on sunrise.
And Governor Ige announced an extension of the mandatory quarantine for trans-Pacific travelers through the end of July, and he said pre-testing is going to be a major part of reopening tourism.
May I have your attention, please?
The governor still won't say when trans-Pacific travel can resume, but did provide more details about how they plan to screen passengers at Hawaii's airports using technology like facial recognition.
The facial recognition would allow us to recognize people who are exceeding the 100.4 temperature as they walk through the terminal.
At a time when cities and major companies are banning the use of facial recognition because of privacy concerns, Governor Ige says the cameras will only be used within airports to identify people who may be sick and need additional screening. State transportation officials say thermal scanners will be installed at airports statewide starting mid-July, and those facial recognition cameras should be operating by the end of the year. The governor says they're still trying to figure out how to welcome back out-of-state visitors safely.
Testing before getting on a plane is one of the key components that we are looking at, and really asking the question about how we would be able to verify who conducted the tests. Would it be a certified laboratory?
Meanwhile, the mandatory quarantine for inter-island travelers will be lifted next week, Tuesday. Passengers are advised to give themselves more time to go through the new screening process, which will include a health and safety form and a temperature check.
Based on what happens during that screening process, they may be offered a COVID-19 test. This is an important moment. It's an important moment where we're testing out a system that is going to be with us for the near future.
Transportation officials say they're also making changes at the airport terminals, so all arriving passengers are at one gate and departing flights are at another. Meanwhile, lawmakers say they want to know more about how the state plans to use facial recognition at airports to ensure privacy protections are in place.
Yeah, we're reaching out to DOT to try and figure out more details about what they're planning. And we know there's benefit, but we also know there's incredible amounts of risk. So before things get out of hand, we want to make sure that it's not going to be something that gets away from us and is going to put people in jeopardy. We've already this year had a couple of bills in the legislature that looked at facial recognition technology specifically to try and put limits on its use. We know that technology can be great and we know there's benefit there, but if used for the wrong reasons and in the wrong way by the wrong people, it can destroy people's lives.
State Representative Chris Lee, who leads the House Judiciary Committee, also chaired a privacy task force this year, where they discussed ways to regulate the controversial technology.
We now know why the man in charge of unemployment, Labor Director Scott Murakami, has been absent for more than a week.
I ordered Director Murakami to take some time off because, as you know, he was under tremendous pressure and stress in dealing with the unemployment insurance challenges.
Murakami has faced death threats and criticism on how the state has handled the overwhelming surge in unemployment claims. No word on how long he'll be out. Meanwhile, more than 228,000 residents say they've lost their job. America's COVID-19 pandemic has crossed another grim milestone. As of today, more than 2 million people have been diagnosed with the coronavirus. Chris Martinez picks up the story from Los Angeles.
I really wanted to acknowledge the team.
Doctors at Northwestern Medicine in Chicago announced a successful life-saving double lung transplant on a woman who had been their sickest patient in the COVID ICU.
Her lungs had completely failed, but then as a result of that, some of her other organs were starting to fail, including heart, liver, and so forth.
The woman is in her 20s. Dr. Ankit Bharat says her age is helping in her recovery.
Today she was FaceTiming with her family. She was smiling, talking to us.
The bit of good news comes as the United States passes another concerning milestone. More than 2 million positive cases of the coronavirus. Many states have seen a rise in hospitalizations in the last 2 weeks, including Texas.
This could be just a blip on the radar, but everybody's watching very intently.
In Arizona, hospital capacity is at 83%. State data shows the use of ventilators, ICU beds, and intubations are at all-time highs.
I think the question is, did we reopen too soon? Is a valid one.
California is going ahead with reopening plans, despite the state seeing an increase in hospitalizations since Memorial Day. Gyms and bars are among the businesses allowed to reopen starting tomorrow.
SeaWorld in Orlando reopened Thursday, even though cases in Florida are on the rise. The governor attributes the rise to an increase in testing.
We've seen no increase in hospitalizations. It's been basically flat.
Oh my, I love you so much.
And in Massachusetts, residents were allowed to visit their family members in nursing homes for the first time in months. Chris Martinez, CBS News, Los Angeles.
The Pentagon is making some changes to military travel to Hawaii. Lacey Denise has the details.
The Pentagon has lifted travel restrictions to Hawaii for military personnel. This was previously restricted by health regulations established after the outbreak of the coronavirus. This week, the U.S. Department of Defense released a list of green locations for travel, which included Hawaii. The green designation follows Hawaii's easing of 14-day quarantine conditions for military personnel and family members traveling to the state under orders. Hawaii has already experienced an increase in arriving military personnel who were classified as exceptions to a previous stop movement order by the Pentagon. There were just over 1,100 military personnel arrivals in Hawaii during the first week of June, and nearly 1,200 traveled to the state in the last 2 weeks of May. However, for residents and tourists arriving in the islands, the 14-day quarantine remains in place.
United Airlines wants to make sure you don't have coronavirus before you board one of its flights, but the company is willing to take your word for it. United has become the first domestic carrier to require all passengers to complete a health questionnaire as part of the check-in process. The survey asks passengers to certify they have not experienced COVID-19 symptoms in the last 14 days or tested positive for the virus in the last 21 days. United is also now requiring all passengers to wear face masks during the entire flight. Airlines have asked the Transportation Security Administration to take passenger temperatures at security checkpoints, but so far the agency is not doing that. Some airports do screen incoming international passengers. Frontier Airlines says it takes every passenger's temperature before allowing them to board.
Satellites are bringing us a new perspective of some of the images of the recent protests. The U.S. government is also using their eyes in the sky to fight coronavirus. Catherine Herridge reports.
From above, iconic landmarks before and after coronavirus hit provide a dramatic slideshow. Watch the crowds vanish from the Vatican St. Peter's Square to Tiananmen Square and Miami Beach.
It was like the world without humanity. In many cases, it was.
But NGA Deputy Director Stacy Dixon doesn't just look for what's missing. She's searching for what's been added. In Germany, the Oktoberfest venue became a COVID testing site. And last month, A satellite spotted these Chinese military planes on a base that used to be a reef in the South China Sea.
Despite the pandemic, countries are still doing things that our military, our policymakers need to understand. As the satellites fly overhead, you can see what the change is on that day.
The highest-ranking woman of color in the U.S. intelligence community, Dixon says these snapshots shared with the State Department, CDC, and Homeland Security provide extraordinary detail.
We can get a report either through a human source or a signal source, and then when a satellite passes over, you can actually confirm whether or not the activity actually took place.
Her agency relies on partners like Maxar Technologies for unclassified images.
The imagery itself can be shared very widely, and often is.
Steve Wood's team tracked the rapid construction of emergency hospitals in Wuhan, China, that just last August looked like this.
But largely an empty parking lot.
But by January, it was completely transformed.
Well, this is like multiple convention centers. That's how big it is.
That's right. 1,600 beds reportedly, but multiple other support buildings, and all done within a space of about 2 weeks.
The Department of Homeland Security later concluded the Chinese government intentionally concealed the severity of COVID-19 in early January while it stockpiled medical supplies.
From an intelligence perspective, this image tells you that the Chinese government understood that they had a real crisis on their hands.
I believe that's right.
As COVID-19 spread to the Middle East, Iran's government seemed to minimize the pandemic. But from the sky, massive new graves were detected in the city of Qom.
How did you take social media and then marry it up with the satellite images?
We had videos that were beginning to surface that showed people that were walking to a cemetery that were showing large trenches that had been prepared in case of the growing pandemic.
These white piles of debris provided another clue.
That was most likely lime to help prevent against the spread of infection. A photo doesn't lie. It's just the facts.
With global protests unfolding, as the U.S. and other nations reopen, there are new COVID hotspots. Now satellite imagery could help show the way forward.
It really gives us a sense to know if countries are really recovering the way that they're portraying themselves to be recovering.
It's that fact check.
That fact check, exactly.
And satellite imagery can help develop better ways to social distance if there's a second wave of COVID or an entirely new virus. Catherine here, CBS News, the Pentagon.
A tragic end to that missing children's case with ties to Hawaii. Relatives say the human remains found on Chad Daybell's property are indeed those of his wife's children. Here's JJ Vallow's grandfather talking to reporters.
I know JJ is with his daddy. Get JJ home, and where her family wants Tylee, we'll get her there. And if she wants to, if they want to be with us and have one service, then you know, I don't care.
Daybell made his first appearance before an Idaho judge yesterday. He was arrested Monday when the bodies of 7-year-old JJ Vallow and 17-year-old Tylee Ryan were discovered on his property. He's charged with 2 counts of destruction of evidence. His wife, Lori Vallow, the children's mother, was arrested on Kauai in February on child abandonment charges. She remains in an Idaho jail.
To Washington now, where the Trump administration is trying to navigate its response to the millions calling for equality. Skylar Henry reports from the White House.
Your reaction to Millie?
President Trump ignored questions before heading to Dallas for a discussion on economic and justice disparities with faith leaders and law enforcement officers.
We are working on approaching stakeholders and making sure that this is the appropriate balance between ensuring police can do their job and ensuring that there is needed reform.
Ahead of the president's trip, his Democratic challenger, Joe Biden, accused him of avoiding meaningful conversations on race and dividing the country.
When he speaks and gives credibility to these racist folks out there, he breathes out, they come out from under the rocks.
We will not rest until the changes are made.
House Democrats announced their massive police reform proposal earlier this week, and Senate Republicans, led by South Carolina's Tim Scott, are expected to unveil theirs soon. The ongoing protests have reignited debate about whether 10 U.S. Army bases named for Confederate leaders should be renamed. President Trump doubled down on his opposition, tweeting Thursday, "Those that deny their history are doomed to repeat it." But military leaders and even some congressional Republicans say they're open to it.
If we're going to have bases throughout the United States, I think it should be with the names of individuals who fought for our country.
Meanwhile, in a video message to military students, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, expressed regret for accompanying President Trump to St. John's Church last week.
That sparked a national debate about the role of the military in civil society. I should not have been there.
The administration received harsh criticism after federal officers cleared peaceful protesters from Lafayette Square ahead of that walk. Skylar Henry, CBS News, the White House.
On Capitol Hill, Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz reintroduced legislation to stop police militarization. The act aims to establish limits and create transparency on the transfer of military-grade equipment to state and local law enforcement. The legislation only applies to offensive equipment like weapons, not defensive equipment like body armor. No word yet if or when Congress will take up the act.
The movement to remove controversial statues is spreading around the world. Ian Lee reports from London.
Workers fish a statue of a 17th century slave trader from a harbor in Bristol. Days earlier, protesters tore it down, giving this symbol of Britain's past a watery grave.
That statue is a kick in the face to all black people.
The UK is facing a day of reckoning, with monuments as the target. Protesters recently vandalized a statue of Winston Churchill outside Parliament. Once voted the greatest Brit of all time for his role in World War II, his controversial colonial policies are coming to light. In response to recent protests, the mayor of London ordered a review of the city's statues and street names.
I'm quite clear, we shouldn't be memorializing, we shouldn't be commemorating, celebrating as icons people who are slavers, plantation owners.
The UK isn't the only country confronting its past. Brussels is removing statues of King Leopold II, whose prosperity in Belgium came at the cost of millions of deaths in the Congo. And in Kenya, a former British colony, people want monuments to their former overlords gone.
This statue reminds me of the suffering our forefathers went through in the hands of colonialists. And whenever we see them, the memory is so fresh.
Around the globe, as statues tumble and fall, protesters hope a new world will be placed on their pedestals. Ian Lee, CBS News, London.
Really interesting to see how that's all unfolding around the world there, for sure. I want to get to our new segment. It's called From the Feeds, and it's where we sort of take an eye at what's going on there on social media. I actually wanted to start with the story I posted today on our digital platforms. It's a holiday, folks. It also mentions a statue, but no outcry about this one. We're talking about Kamehameha Day. So here's some did you knows, Ashley.
All right.
So did you know this is the one that's right downtown, the statue. There's a number of statues. This is one right downtown, and it is not the original one. Actually, in the 1890s, when it was commissioned, it was being shipped over here on a ship, and it sunk. It sunk. It really did. And
the ship sunk?
Yeah,
Wow.
and it was lost. The statue was lost. They rebuilt it, and that's the second one we have here.
Interesting.
But did you know they found it? So that's why there's one on the Big Island too.
They found it in the ocean?
Yeah, they found it and put it on the Big Island.
All right.
And then you may recall, that one's had a troubled past. Do you remember a few years back someone stole the sphere?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep going here. You might recognize this one.
Oh, I know that one.
Where's that one?
That one is in the United States Capitol in Emancipation Hall.
That's so cool. You can walk in there and see that, right?
I've spent many Kamehameha days near that statue.
So in this story, we go into the depth about all the different statues and the history behind them, but here's a mystery. Do you remember this one? Some of you might. It was in Vegas at the Hawaiian Marketplace, right there on the Strip, until a few years ago, and that's where the mystery starts. Where did the statue go, folks? Well, unfortunately, it's not a good thing. It was actually just made out of plastic. It wasn't like constructed like our other ones, but it ended up being given to a park there. It was sort of a place where people have events and weddings. It was very popular with the Hawaiian community, and I think it's called Warm Springs is the area, and I think that's even where the Zippies is going in. It's so popular, or was planned on going in.
So there's a plastic Kamehameha statue.
Well, it went there, and then it deteriorated, and they had to get rid of it, unfortunately. So I don't want to give away the whole story. You have to go to our app or H&N Digital Feeds to check it out, but that's what I found on the feeds. I put it there myself, so That's what I got. What do you got cooking?
So the movement of change sparked by George Floyd's death has also reached a very popular music trio. Lady Antebellum announced on Instagram this morning that they are going to drop the word antebellum from their name because, quote, the associations that weigh down this word referring to the period of history before the Civil War, which includes slavery. Now, the trio also apologized for the hurt that portion of their name may have caused, and they were regretful and embarrassed they had not taken the associations into account earlier. Now, many of their fans have already been using the informal nickname of Lady A over the years, so
I like it better.
Yeah, it's
I like
catchy.
It's cool to see how the entertainment world is responding to this. We were talking yesterday about how HBO Max removed Gone with the Wind out of concerns. Cops has been canceled after decades on TV. So it's a new world, folks.
Definitely. Meanwhile, back here at home, over the past several months, more than a dozen Hawaiian green sea turtles have moved onto Bellows Beach to lay their eggs. Now, Marine Corps officials say it's the first time they've documented the honus nesting at the popular spot. But as Rick Desog reports, while nature lovers may be enjoying this development, it could create challenges for that busy area.
These photos of a Hawaiian green sea turtle digging a nest at Bellows Beach were taken in April. Since then, Marine Corps officials say at least 13 honu have since laid their eggs at the popular Waimanalo Beach.
That's unheard of. In fact, some say they've never even seen a nest site here on Oahu in this area, period.
Scientists say that Hawaiian green sea turtles do 90% of their nesting in the French frigate shoals of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, but they do occasionally lay their eggs on Maui and at Kahuku on Oahu. The Marine Corps, which conducts training at Bellows, has taken precautions. They've roped off nests so eggs won't be trampled on and have placed warning signs 100 feet from each nest site. Biologists and conservation workers are also monitoring the nests. The Marines issued this statement today. Quote, this is the first time Marine Corps Base Hawaii has documented nesting at Bellows Beach. As this was unprecedented, our environmental department was quick to ensure further observation and protection measures for the identified nesting sites. The problem with this nesting site is that it's located next to a popular campground, which the city plans to reopen. Trash left by campers can attract potential predators like rats and feral cats. Also, baby sea turtles are attracted to bright lights, so campfires and other lights could lead them away from the ocean after they hatch.
I'm asking the Mayor Kurt Caldwell, this no longer will be used as a park, or at least until the turtles start hatch and leave.
The city says it will increase monitoring of the area, but will not close the campgrounds. Quote, it is our firm hope that further action to limit public access to the shoreline will not be necessary, and we request that beachgoers help us and the sea turtles by being respectful of these nesting areas. The discovery of the nest will also likely fuel further opposition to the city's controversial Sherwoods Park redevelopment project nearby, which has been stalled due to the recent discovery of Evie. Since it takes about 60 days for the turtle eggs to incubate, many of the first hatchlings will start leaving their nests soon. Rick Desog, Hawaii News Now.
Great report there, Rick. Okay, we all know the wedding industry has taken quite the hit during the pandemic. Casey Lund takes a look at how the local industry is doing.
It's clear to see why so many people choose to have their weddings here in Hawaii. And while DLNR says that small beach ceremonies with 10 people or less can resume, that doesn't mean that DJs, photographers, musicians, and officiants, those working in the wedding industry, are out of the woods just yet.
That was our big day. You know, we were so ecstatic when we found out we were going to get married, and our momentum was really building for the big day. And then it just sort of rained on our parade because then we just realized that it wasn't going to happen.
Layla Saberi and her fiancé Mitchell held off postponing their wedding until the last minute, hoping the COVID-19 pandemic would slow and travel restrictions would be lifted.
A lot of our concerns stemmed with the guests being elder or being medically compromised and having to put them on a plane to come from the mainland over here and exposing them. So that was a huge decision-making factor for us. Did we want to do that? Did we want to put everyone in a big room together like that and having them to travel so far for that?
They're not alone. Photographer John Lagon says his business of 15 years, Visionary, had hundreds of weddings booked before the pandemic got serious in Hawaii around mid-March.
For us, we average about 200 weddings a month.
guests, and we're down to 0.
DJs who also rely heavily on weddings and other large events are struggling to find work.
There was a definitive date, like right at the end of March. Something happened, the governor said something, and it was over. And we all knew it was over. And I started to just kind of grasp things. I was like, oh my God, are things going to start canceling? Are things going to start canceling? And I swear, not even 24 hours, I started getting cancellation notices from weddings, graduation parties, nightclub gigs. I mean, it was one after the other. It was a domino effect. I mean, I felt my heart plunging into my stomach.
Professionals in the industry are hoping Hawaii's leaders can be progressive and explore safe ways to lift the travel quarantine sooner rather than later. For the couples who have put off their special day, perhaps the turmoil caused by the pandemic can make their bond stronger.
We were super sad about it. It wasn't what we wanted. We've gotten really good support from all our friends and family about it. You know, they're very much looking forward to when we can get together and celebrate our union. And they definitely respect the fact that we thought about them instead of just pushing forward the date and having them not be able to join us.
Casey Lund, Hawaii News Now.
I want to get to some good news real fast, right?
That's right. Check this out, guys. So with beaches reopening with social distancing rules,
Cool.
one company wants to help you take the guesswork out of social distancing. It's called the Beach Ring, and it's a physical ring that stretches out to create a 12-foot circle. The maker's Cool Breeze says anyone inside can easily keep 6 feet away from everyone else.
Love it, guys. That's going to do it for This Is Now. Take care. We'll see you at 5.